What if I told you a court ordered a father to pay 3/4 of his salary to his ex-wife, even though she earns 3 times more than he does? This isn't a hypothetical. It's a real decision from Israel's Rabbinical Court that sparked a massive controversy. And it really forces us to ask some tough questions about fairness, tradition, and the real-world impact on kids who are caught right in the middle. So let's start with the basic numbers, because this is where it all begins. On one side, you have the father. He's earning 6,000 shekels a month. On the other side, the mother, who's bringing in 18,000 shekels, a full 3 times as much. Just keep those two numbers in your head, because the math is about to get very, very strange. Now, let's add another layer to this. They share custody of their 3 kids equally, 50-50. So you look at the incomes, you look at the shared custody, you'd think it's pretty obvious who should be helping who out financially, right? Well, let's just say the court's answer was not what anyone expected. To really get our heads around this, we're going to break it down. First, we'll look at the case itself, this financial puzzle. Then, the court's ruling and the wild logic behind it. We'll compare the rabbinical court system to the civil one. Then, we'll get to the real heart of it, the human cost. And finally, we'll look at why this whole system is under such intense scrutiny. Okay, so let's dive in. Let's lay out all the exact pieces of this puzzle just as they were presented to the court. The facts of the case are totally straightforward. No one's disputing them. We've got divorced parents, 3 kids. Now, here's a key detail. All the children are over the age of 6. That's going to be really important later. Custody is split right down the middle, 50-50. And, of course, the mother earns triple what the father does. Seems simple enough. And yet, this was the final ruling. The court ordered the father to pay 4,600 shekels a month to the mother. I mean, that's over 75% of his entire income. It's going to someone who already makes 3 times as much as he does. The immediate question is, how? How is that even possible? Well, to understand this, you kind of have to throw modern arithmetic out the window. The court's logic isn't based on an Excel spreadsheet. It's based on centuries-old religious law. And that law splits this payment into 2 very different categories. Okay, so part 1 is the basic child support, what's known as mezonot. The court set this at 700 shekels for each of the 3 kids for a total of 2,100. This is supposed to cover their essential needs when they're staying with their mother. But that was just the beginning. Then came the second piece of the puzzle, and it was even bigger. Another 2,500 shekels for mador, which is housing. The court's logic was that the father has a fixed, unchangeable obligation to pay for his children's housing at their mother's home, no matter what the custody schedule looks like. And this right here, this is the absolute heart of the entire ruling. It all comes down to a core principle in religious law, the father's absolute obligation. This idea says that the primary, fundamental duty for a child's financial well-being lands squarely on the father's shoulders. It doesn't matter what the mother earns. Now, remember how I said the kids being over 6 was important? Here's why. For kids over that age, the support is technically considered tzedakah, which is sort of like an act of righteousness or charity. And this, in theory, should open the door to factoring in the mother's income. But in this case, especially with that huge fixed housing cost, it barely made a difference to the father's bottom line. You know, this ruling really throws a spotlight on a much bigger issue in Israel. It's this fundamental clash between 2 completely separate legal systems that exist side by side, the religious rabbinical court and the modern civil family court. And I mean, just look at the difference. It is night and day. In the rabbinical court, the mother's income was basically irrelevant. In a civil court, it would be a central part of the calculation. Housing costs, fixed obligation for the dad and the rabbinical court. In civil court, they'd be shared based on income. The source material is crystal clear on this. If this case had been in a civil court, the outcome would have been the exact opposite. The mother would almost certainly be paying support to the father. But let's move beyond the legal arguments for a second, because this is where the public anger really came from. It's about the very real, very severe consequences this ruling has on the children themselves. Because what this ruling does, in effect, is create 2 totally different worlds for these kids. Half the week, they're at their father's house, who's left with less than 1,400 shekels a month to live on. It's described as a poor house. Then they go to their mother's house, where her 18,000 shekel salary is now boosted by another 4,600. It's a rich house. And these kids are forced to bounce between these 2 economic extremes every single week. And that leads to this absolutely devastating question that the source material poses. The argument is that this isn't just about what toys they have or what food they eat. It's that this massive disparity could actively poison their relationship with their father, making his home and by extension him seem less than. As you can probably guess, a decision this shocking didn't stay a private family matter for long. Once the details got out, it kicked off a storm of criticism aimed not just at this one ruling, but at the entire system that made it possible. It all really took off with this one Facebook post. Someone laid out the crazy numbers for everyone to see, the $6,000 versus $18,000, the final payment, and it just went viral. All of a sudden, the whole country was debating whether these ancient laws make any sense for modern families. The legal critics were even tougher. They basically called the court's whole reasoning about tzedakah a cynical play on words. The allegation is that the court was just pretending to consider the mother's income to look modern and fair, all while sticking to an old, rigid principle that puts the entire burden on the father. And so, this one family's impossible financial equation leaves all of us with a much bigger, more fundamental question. In a world where families have changed, where custody is often shared, where women are often the primary breadwinners, can a legal system designed for a different time and place truly serve the best interests of children today? Or does it, as this case suggests, risk hurting them the most?